a few weeks later, I officially joined the band.
Right.
And
one of the happiest days of my life, I got to tell you.
It was
one of the happiest days
me
of my
too,
life.
because I went in the studio,
I completed it.
Finding joy in my playing again, and it was to recut actually do my tracks to a few songs, except for Mental Health and Don't Want to Let You Go. That's Chuck playing on the record.
Correct.
Okay. So it was Breathless was one of them,
Yep.
and Come On Feel the Noise. And since Breathless was an original, basically I just approached it from an original song. But since Come On Feel the Noise was a cover,
Right.
But I didn't know when I heard the track coming back. After all the guitars were laid down and everything, it was like. Since I had never heard the original before,
right.
It was, we didn't have YouTube that you can reference anything. No, it was like, who's got the record to this? Oh, nobody. Okay, well.
We reinvented it because we didn't have, and pick my words carefully, we didn't have the tools to take us in the wrong direction.
Exactly. Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And so. I'm listening to this and I'm going, okay, this is a little bit different from everything else on the record, and I have been playing heavy metal with Ozzy,
right.
So I was in a heavy metal zone in my head, and I go, this kind of reminds me like Cheap Trick, and I thought, what would Tom Peterson do?
Right, and we spent time in Chicago playing all the same dumps they did.
Exactly. And so that was basically my approach.
That's great.
It's like, do kind of like what Tom Peterson, what I think would have done to the song, with the song,
which gave it a solid pop identity.
Yeah, it was definitely a pop song.
Yeah, but it gave it a pop identity because what you played on the bass was as much key as what the guitar was playing. In other words. The bass on that song is not subservient. It's not just part of the rhythm section. It actually adds its own melodies to it,
which is what Tom Peterson does
with
Cheap Trick.
Yes.
But now talking about your contribution not only to the Mental Health record, but the Mental Health version of Quiet Riot, because we always differentiate the Quiet Riot, the Randy Rhoads version, years, and the Mental Health version. Yes. It's like with Randy not being in the band for the Mental Health version, I always say that the biggest part of the sound is your playing on it. What you brought, the energy. It's not just the energy. You brought in a and I hate to use, because you love John Bonham, but you play very different from him, But there's a certain foundation and strength and in your playing that gave Quiet Riot that arena sound that, as far as the rhythm section, it did not have before. Quiet Riot with Randy looked like an arena band, but it didn't have the arena beat to it.
Well. A lot of that, and oddly enough, because you mentioned John Bonham, a lot of that has to do with. I knew that the Quiet Riot songs, Dubrow, then into Quiet Riot, that we did, the songs that we did were nothing like what Led Zeppelin did. But what I did is I applied a lot of the lessons I learned from John Bonham's playing, which is backbeat, keep it in the pocket. Don't overuse the crash cymbals, So those are the things. So although it's not Led Zeppelin style of music, I use those lessons. Played less because it gave it a much bigger sound. The less you play on the drums, the bigger it sounds, because the more information you put on there is distracting from the fullness of it. And that's really what I did. And my happiest playing is when I'm supporting everything else that's going on around me. That is my happiest playing.
I know, taking into consideration that by the time you recorded Mental Health, you have already in my opinion, develop your style, your sound. You had a sound, you had a style already. Whereas when Quiet Riot with Randy broke up, Randy and Kevin transitioned. Randy's songwriting style, even from Blizzard of Oz going into Diary of a Madman, it's very different.
Yeah,
Leaps and
complete
bounds,
progression.
completely.
Yeah.
A lot of it had to do with Quiet Riot in the 70s, being in a situation just like every other band in town, trying to please the record companies.
Right.
And by the time Randy joined Ozzy just said, "Listen, just write what comes out of you.
Be yourself.
Just be yourself."
Yeah.
And that's what's on those two records.
Yeah.
The same thing happened with Kevin. Kevin, as a matter of fact, one of the things that I love about playing Slate Black Cadillac, it's knowing that song was written as a challenge by Randy to Kevin to write a great rock song.
Yep.
And he came up with, I think it's a masterpiece.
Unbelievable. A lot of people don't realize that's a Kevin song.
Yeah, completely.
Randy threw him in the deepest end of the pool, and Kevin swam for his life.
Yeah,
and that was the product of
it. It's a classic.
Yeah.
And
which is why I wanted it on the Mental Health record.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, that was the
transition.
The thread running from the previous version of the band to the new version of the band. That song, and I believe on Condition Critical, Winners Take All was a portion of it. Used to be Teenage Anthem.
Correct.
And it was rewritten.
Correct.
So that's another thread that goes back to the previous version of the band. Kevin, once he was on his own, his songwriting style really changed and it really grew. I think it got more personal.
Yeah. It's interesting because the first time that Kevin actually saw me play where he paid attention, I was playing with Monarch, and we played a club, the Valley West Supper Club. And Kevin came down with McDougal.
Alan McDougal.
Alan McDougal.
Yes.
Alan had seen me play with Monarch, and he says, you should go see him play. He reminds me of John Bonham meets Cozy Powell, which was like the greatest compliment you could give me, because those are two of my favorite drummers. And so he came down, and there's a video of that entire show that I have. It was recorded on VHS. It's only one copy, and you see Kevin in front of you see the back of his head in front of the drum set, McDougal next to him, and as Monarch was that Led Zeppelin, Jeff Beck kind of offshoot type of band. So afterwards, I was up at the bar getting a drink, because I never drank, seriously when I was playing, but definitely after the show. Yeah. And Kevin came up, and I remember meeting him from the Starwood and that failed attempt to have me come in, and he goes, "You're the drummer for me." And he goes, "Rudy told me so, and Randy told me so, but I had to see it for myself." And I said, "You buying?" and that's where it started. Now, I turned him down because at the time I was in 5 bands at the same time. It was just to make ends meet. I turned him down, and he says, "Well, we get paid okay. I can pay you this much for a show." And I said, "All right." And we started playing together, and I figured out that I was enjoying playing with him more than I was enjoying playing with all the other bands. And so I flipped that coin, I tossed that coin, and Monarch was falling apart at that point anyway, and I stopped doing everything but Dubrow. And I put all my eggs in that one basket.
Yeah. Just like I did with Quiet Riot.
Yep. Yep.
And looking back, right now we're sitting in a kind of like my man cave, my man cave here doing this podcast. and I happen to have certain gold records and multi-platinum records on my wall. One of them right behind Frankie right now. It's the 10 million worldwide mental health.
As of 2003.
2003, 15 years ago.
Yeah.
When you look at that, not just the award, but actually, how did it feel holding that first pressed mental health album in your hand without knowing how many it was going to sell?
Well, even before I got the first pressing, I got the flat. For those people who don't know, the flat is what the album cover is before it's folded together and glued, and they stick the record in. And I got the flat to go to NAMM to try to get endorsements. So I'm walking with this big flag. This is my first time I've ever been to NAMM. So I must have looked like the biggest dork on the planet. You know, this was the single largest business card on the face of the earth. And you know, I got summarily turned down by Bill Ludwig III, you know, just get out of here, man. And I think Peisty may have actually spat on me. But I'm not entirely. It could have been sweat. I'm not entirely sure. But the first time I played that record, I had already recorded other records that had come out. You know, I mean, I had already recorded the Billy Idol, Randy Bishop, something for Rod Falconer, Danny Spanos,
Hugh
Thrall,
yeah,
all those things. But the mental health record was special because that was our team. Mm-hmm. You know, it was all the people that I wanted to play with, that I've been playing with, that we've been playing in all the shitty bars in LA, and this was the end result. And it was the end result that didn't happen to too many rock bands, because remember, at the time it was all new wave.
Absolutely.
You know, so for me, it was the single most monumental thing. I mean, I literally sat in my apartment and played it and turned it over and played it and turned it over and played it and turned it over and played it over and over and over again. Whether it would have sold anything or not, this was the concentration of everything we had done prior to this. This is where we wanted to be. This was our first Beatles record, so to speak, in my mind. You know, all those other records I played on were great. Love them all, but this one was personal.
Yeah, I mean, it had so many things going against it. First of all, we couldn't find a manager because nobody wanted to manage the band. Yeah. They thought that the music on that record, with the record done, with the release date, mm-hmm. was dinosaur music. Yeah. This is never coming back.
Yeah, it was the deck was stacked so against us for a couple of reasons. We inherited the misfortune of the first version of Quiet Riot mm-hmm. being the single most popular band after Van Halen, and then after Van Halen were signed and they became Van Halen, mm-hmm. it was the single most important band in Hollywood that had been passed by every single label. Yeah. Nobody cared. The band released 2 records in Japan, and that's it. Mm-hmm. America did not care. Yeah. So we inherited why should we pay attention to these guys? These guys have been around forever. They've done nothing. They're never going to be anything. Yeah. And they're nothing like what's on the radio.
Yeah. Plus, you know, we started out at 0. Mm-hmm. At 0. Minus 0. I remember you guys getting, because I had saved some money from, you know, touring with Ozzy, but you guys were just basically getting gas money to go to the studio to record.
Oh, used to go over to when we got Warren Etner to manage the band, things didn't improve. I used to walk to his duplex mm-hmm. and answer phones mm-hmm. for Burger King money.
Yep. Yeah. And our first tour, actually on 18th and 19th of March, 1983.
Right.
were the first two shows we did.
Sold out at the Roxy.
2 shows a night, so it's actually 4 shows.
Yep.
And it was actually recorded
Yep.
for Westwood One or
Westwood One, yeah.